Ji-eun Kim had always been punctual with her rent payments to her landlord, Mr. Park, for the 3 years she lived in his apartment building. The small 2-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor had become her sanctuary after long shifts at Seoul National Hospital. The walls were thin, but she had made it cozy with plants, photos of family, and the soft blankets her mother had knitted. Every month without fail, Ji-eun would transfer the exact amount to Mr. Park's account 5 days before the due date. She took pride in being reliable. Even when her washing machine broke last winter and ate into her savings, she made sure the rent was paid on time. Mr. Park had noticed this consistency and would sometimes leave small seasonal gifts at her door. Persimmons in autumn, rice cakes in spring. Working in the emergency department meant Ji-eun's schedule was unpredictable. Some weeks she worked 6 days straight, coming home with aching feet and barely enough energy to heat up leftover kimchi stew. Her friends had stopped inviting her to weekend trips because she so often had to cancel at the last minute. Her vacation. Days had piled up unused. "You need to rest before you collapse," her co-worker Yuna told her after finding Ji-eun dozing in the break room. "Your patients need you healthy." Ji-eun knew Yuna was right. The dark circles under her eyes had become permanent fixtures, and she had started making small mistakes at work. Nothing dangerous, but enough to worry her. When her phone buzzed one Tuesday evening with a message from her college friend Hae-jin, Ji-eun almost ignored it, but the preview caught her eye. "Last-minute spot opened up on Europe trip. 40% discount. Need answer by Friday." Ji-eun stared at the message. She had always dreamed of seeing Paris, eating real pasta in Italy, and standing under the towering cathedrals of Spain. Hae-jin had sent photos of the itinerary. 2 weeks, 5 countries, all accommodations included. Even with the discount, it would cost nearly 3 months of rent. That night, Ji-eun couldn't sleep. She made lists of pros and cons, calculated and recalculated her savings, and browsed through travel blogs until her eyes burned. The trip would leave in 3 weeks. Not enough time to save extra money, but enough time to request the time off work. Her savings account held enough for emergencies and some extra, but using it all felt irresponsible. What if she returned? To a medical bill or car repair? The thought made her stomach tight with anxiety. Then a wild idea struck her. What if she could temporarily pause her rent payments? Just for 2 or 3 months. She had been a perfect tenant. Maybe that counted for something. Ji-eun spent the next day drafting and redrafting an email to Mr. Park. Too formal sounded demanding. Too casual seemed disrespectful. She settled on honest and straightforward. "Dear Mr. Park, I hope this message finds you well. I've been presented with an unexpected opportunity to join a discounted group trip to Europe that leaves in 3 weeks. As you know, I've always paid rent promptly, but this trip would require a significant portion of my savings. Would it be possible to temporarily pause my rent payments for 2 months? I would resume payments immediately upon my return and add an extra amount each month until I've caught up. I understand if this isn't possible, but I wanted to ask. Thank you for your consideration." Her finger hovered over the send button for nearly 10 minutes before she finally pressed it. She immediately felt sick with worry. What was she thinking? Landlords don't just let people skip rent to go on vacation. Mr. Park would probably laugh at her audacity, or worse, think she was becoming unreliable. Ji-eun tried to distract herself by tidying her apartment and preparing for her early shift the next day. When her phone chimed with an email notification, her heart jumped into her throat. She expected an immediate rejection. Instead, Mr. Park's response was brief. "Ji-eun, this is an unusual request. I'd like to discuss it in person. Are you available to meet at my office tomorrow at 6 p.m? Ji-eun read the message 5 times. Not a yes, but not a no either. She quickly replied that she would be there. That night, she rehearsed explanations and counter-arguments in her head. She practiced looking professional yet apologetic in her bathroom mirror. She even prepared to hear no gracefully. As she finally drifted off to sleep, Ji-eun wondered if this impulsive request would damage the good relationship she had built with Mr. Park over the years. But somehow, the possibility of seeing the Eiffel Tower sparkle at night made the risk seem worth it. Ji-eun arrived at Mr. Park's office 15 minutes early, her hands slightly shaky as she checked her appearance one last time in her phone. Camera. She had come straight from her hospital shift, changing from scrubs into a simple blue blouse and dark pants in the staff bathroom. Her hair was pulled back neatly, but she couldn't hide the tiredness in her eyes. The building management office was on the ground floor, a small space with beige walls and the faint smell of instant coffee. The waiting area had just 2 chairs and a small table with outdated magazines. Through the thin walls, Jian could hear Mr. Park on the phone, his voice low but firm as he discussed a plumbing issue with someone. When the office door finally opened, Mr. Park waved her in with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He was in his early 60s, with salt and pepper hair and reading glasses that hung from a cord around his neck. His desk was organized but full, stacks of papers, building plans, and a framed photo turned away from her view. "Please sit, Jiun," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Would you like some tea?" She nodded, surprised by the offer. She had expected a quick, uncomfortable conversation. Mr. Park prepared 2 cups from a small electric kettle. In the corner, the familiar smell of barley tea filling the room. "So," he began after taking a sip, "I read your email several times. It's certainly not a request I get often." Jiun felt her cheeks warm. "I understand it's unusual," she said, looking down at her tea. "I wouldn't normally ask something like this." Mr. Park opened a folder on his desk and turned it so she could see. It was her rental history, 36 on-time payments, highlighted in green. 3 years without missing once, he noted thoughtfully, running his finger down the neat column of dates. Not even during Lunar New Year when everyone's spending extra. Jiun hadn't expected him to keep such detailed records. The green highlights made her feel both proud and more nervous about her request. "I've had tenants for 20 years, Mr. Park continued, closing the folder. "Most good people, but few as reliable as you. No complaints from neighbors, no late-night parties. You even sweep the hallway outside your door, which isn't your responsibility." Jiun shifted in her seat, unsure if she should respond. Mr. Park took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "I understand needing a break," he said, his voice softening. His eyes drifted to the framed photo on his desk. With a gentle hand, he turned it toward Jiun. It showed a younger Mr. Park with a woman about the same age, both smiling widely on what looked like a hiking trail. "My wife Sua and I never took enough vacations when we were younger, always too busy with the buildings, with making a living." His voice had a slight tremble now. "She passed last year with so many trips still unplanned. Paris in spring, the cherry blossoms in Japan, the beaches in Thailand, all just talk." Jiun felt a lump in her throat. "I'm very sorry about your wife," she said quietly. Mr. Park nodded, turning the photo back toward himself. 42 years together. We always said later for the things we wanted to do." He looked directly at Ji-un now. "That's why I didn't immediately say no to your request, but—" He sighed heavily. Ji-un's heart sank. "Here it comes," she thought. "I still have building expenses to cover," Mr. Park explained, spreading his hands in a helpless gesture. "Property taxes, maintenance, utilities for common areas. Each unit's rent is calculated to cover its share." Ji-un nodded quickly. "I completely understand," she said, already planning how to let Haijin know she couldn't join the trip after all. "It was wrong of me to ask." "I didn't say that," Mr. Park corrected her gently. "Your request made me think of Sua, of all our postponed dreams. After she got sick, we had money but no time. You're young, you have time but need the money." He pulled out a calculator and a notepad, writing down some figures. Ji-un watched, confused about where this was going. Was he calculating late fees, interest on delayed payments? "Here's the situation," he said finally. "I have mortgage payments that can't wait, bills that come every month regardless of my circumstances." He tapped his pen on the paper. "But I also believe in living while you can." Jiun leaned forward slightly, afraid to hope. "If I were to agree to a payment pause," Mr. Park said slowly, "I would need certain guarantees, a formal agreement, perhaps something additional to make up for the inconvenience." Jiun's breath caught. Was he actually considering it? She had come prepared for an immediate rejection, had already accepted it in her mind. "Of course," she said quickly. Any terms you think are fair." Mr. Park studied her face for a long moment, as if making a final assessment. Then he reached for a new sheet of paper. Ji-yoon prepared herself for the refusal she was certain would follow, but something in Mr. Park's expression had changed. There was a warmth there that hadn't been present at the start of their meeting. "I have a proposal for you," he said, surprising her once again. "Not exactly what you asked for, but perhaps something that might work for both of us." "I won't pause your rent," Mr. Park said, folding his hands on the desk. Ji-yoon's heart sank, but she nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. She had prepared herself for this outcome, after all. "But," he continued, surprising her, "I think I have a better solution." Ji-yoon looked up, confused. Mr. Park was opening a drawer, pulling out a small photo album with a worn leather cover. He handled it with care, turning pages slowly until he found what he was looking for. "My sister, Mija," he said, turning the album toward Ji-yoon. The photo showed a smiling woman in her late 50s, standing in front of a charming stone building, with blue shutters and flower boxes bursting with red geraniums. She moved to Italy 20 years ago, after falling in love with a chef she met while on vacation. They run a small bed and breakfast in Florence. Ji-yoon studied the photo, still, not understanding where this was going. The building looked warm and inviting, exactly the kind of place she'd love to stay but probably couldn't afford. "Florence," Mr. Park said with emphasis, watching her face. "That's one of your destinations, isn't it?" Ji-yoon nodded slowly. "Yes. We're planning 3 nights there." Mr. Park smiled. "Mija's place isn't large or fancy like the big hotels, but it's in the heart of the old city, walking distance to the Duomo, the Uffizi Gallery, all the main sites." He tapped the photo. "And her husband makes the best breakfast in all of Tuscany. At least, that's what she claims." "It looks lovely," Ji-yoon said sincerely, still confused about why he was telling her this. "Stay there for 3 nights at no cost," Mr. Park said simply. "I'll make the arrangements. Consider it my contribution to your trip." Ji-yoon's eyes widened. "That's incredibly generous, but I couldn't possibly—" Mr. Park held up a hand. "It's not charity. Mija always keeps one room open for family. It sits empty most of the time. She'd be delighted to host you." Ji-yoon was speechless. Free accommodation in Florence would save her a significant amount of money, making the trip much more affordable. But it felt like too much, especially when she'd come in asking for something completely different. "I don't know what to say," she finally managed. "Say you'll enjoy Florence," Mr. Park replied with a slight smile, "and that you'll take lots of pictures for an old man who may never see it himself." Ji-yoon nodded, still stunned by the offer. "Of course I will, but what about the rent?" "Ah yes," Mr. Park said, shifting back to his business manner. "That's the second part of my proposal. You'll continue paying your rent as usual." Ji-yoon nodded, accepting this condition. It still meant dipping deeply into her savings, but the free accommodation would help significantly. "When you return," Mr. Park continued, "instead of additional rent payments to make up for any financial strain, I'd like your help with something else." He reached for his laptop, opening it to reveal a website that looked like it was designed in the early 2000s. The apartment building's name was displayed in an outdated font with blurry photos and a clunky layout. "Our building's website," he explained, looking slightly embarrassed. "Last updated 8 years ago by my nephew, who has since moved to Canada. I've been meaning to redesign it but never found the time or the right person." Ji-yoon leaned forward to get a better look at the screen. The site was indeed badly in need of an update. "Your neighbor, Mrs. Kang, mentioned you helped her set up an online store for her handmade jewelry," Mr. Park said. "She was very impressed with your work." Ji-yoon felt her cheeks warm at the compliment. Web design had been a hobby she'd picked up during nursing school, a creative outlet that balanced the intensity of her medical studies. She'd helped several friends and neighbors with small projects over the years. "I'm not a professional," she said honestly, "but I do enjoy it." "Professional. Websites cost thousands," Mr. Park said, turning the laptop back toward himself. "I've received quotes, but I don't need anything fancy. Just something modern that works well on phones and computers. Something that shows accurate information about the building, the neighborhood, available units." Ji-yoon's mind was already racing with ideas. The current site was so outdated, that almost anything would be an improvement. "So that's my offer," Mr. Park said, closing the laptop. "Stay at Mija's in Florence at no cost. When you return, help me update this website. No additional rent payments needed." Ji-un sat back, processing the unexpected proposal. Not only was Mr. Park not angry about her request, but he'd found a way to make her trip more affordable while creating a mutually beneficial arrangement. She would save money on accommodation, and he would get a new website without paying a professional agency. "This is much more than I expected," she said sincerely. "Are you sure?" Mr. Park's eyes crinkled at the corners. "My wife always said I was too rigid, too focused on business. In her last months, she made me promise to be more—" He searched for the right word. "Human in how I dealt with people, to see beyond transactions." He glanced at the photo of his wife. "I think she would approve of this arrangement." Ji-un felt a lump in her throat. "I would be honored to stay with your sister, and I promise to create a website you'll be proud of." Mr. Park nodded, satisfied. "Good. Now, let me call Mija. She'll want to know what you like for breakfast." He reached for his phone, then paused, looking at Ji-un with an unexpectedly mischievous smile. "And perhaps don't mention our arrangement to the other tenants. I don't want everyone asking for vacation deals." Ji-un laughed, feeling lighter than she had in months. "It'll be our secret." Ji-un stepped off the plane with tired eyes, but a heart full of memories. The 2-week European adventure had been everything she'd hoped for and more. Paris had charmed her with its elegant streets and buttery croissants. Switzerland had taken her breath away, with mountains that seemed to touch the clouds. But Florence had felt like finding a second home. Mr. Park's sister Mija had greeted Ji-un with a warm hug at her bed and breakfast, a 3-story stone building with wisteria climbing its walls. "My brother told me you work too hard," she had said in Korean, her accent softened by years of speaking Italian. Here we fix that. True to her word, Mija had treated Ji-un like a long-lost niece rather than a guest. Each morning began with her husband Antonio's legendary breakfasts, fresh pastries still warm from the oven, homemade yogurt with local honey, and cappuccinos that made Ji-un close her eyes in bliss with every sip. "Too skinny," Antonio would say, placing extra pastries on her plate. Nurses need strength. What had truly made the Florence stay special were the hidden spots Mija revealed, places most tourists never discovered. A tiny workshop where an old man made paper by hand, just as his family had done for 7 generations. A courtyard garden, hidden behind an unmarked door, where monks had once grown medicinal herbs. A gelato shop down a narrow alley that served flavors like rose petal and pine nut. "This is the real Florence," Mija had told her, as they sipped wine on a hillside overlooking the city at sunset. Not just the big churches and museums everyone takes pictures of. On Ji-un's last night in Florence, Mija had pressed a small package into her hands. "For my brother," she said. "And this," she added, handing over a carefully wrapped bottle, "is for you. Antonio's homemade limoncello, to remind you of Italy when work gets too hard." Back in her apartment now, unpacking her suitcase, Ji-un smiled at the bottle sitting on her kitchen counter. She had delivered Mr. Park's package that morning, a set of hand-painted ceramic coasters and a letter from his sister. His eyes had grown misty as he examined the coasters. "Mija says you were a perfect guest," he had told her. "She wants you to visit again." Ji-un had promised she would someday. But first, she had a promise to keep. The day after returning to work, Ji-un began tackling the website project. She set up a small workstation in her living room with her laptop, a notebook full of ideas, and endless cups of barley tea. What had started as a simple obligation, a payment of sorts for Mr. Park's generosity, quickly transformed into something she looked forward to after her hospital shifts. Ji-un had originally planned to just update the existing site with better photos and a more modern design, but as she worked, her ambitions grew. Why not add virtual tours of the different apartment layouts? Why not create a section where current tenants could leave reviews about their experiences living in the building? Why not build an efficient maintenance request system so residents wouldn't have to call or text Mr. Park about every leaky faucet? 3 weeks into the project, Ji-eun invited Mr. Park to her apartment to show him her progress. She had expected polite approval. Instead, he had stared at her screen in silent amazement for so long that she worried he hated it. "This is professional work," he finally said, adjusting his glasses as he leaned closer to examine the design. "You built all this yourself?" Ji-eun nodded, explaining the features she'd implemented and the ones still in progress. Mr. Park asked thoughtful questions, occasionally making notes. When she demonstrated how the maintenance request system would work, showing how it would automatically categorize issues by urgency and send notifications to the right person, he shook his head in wonder. "The property management company I consulted wanted $5,000 for something not nearly as good as this," he admitted. "I'm enjoying it," Ji-eun said honestly. "It's different from nursing, more creative. It lets my mind work in new ways." By the 2-month mark, the website was complete. Ji-eun had spent countless evenings and weekends perfecting it, far exceeding the hours that would have been fair compensation for 3 nights' accommodation in Florence. But somewhere along the way, the project had stopped being about paying a debt and had become a passion project, something she was genuinely proud of. The launch day came on a Sunday afternoon. Mr. Park invited Ji-eun to his office, where he had prepared a small celebration, sweet rice cakes and persimmon tea. Together they pressed the button to make the new site live. "To new beginnings," Mr. Park said, raising his teacup in a toast. That evening, as Ji-eun watered her plants and prepared for the week ahead, her phone chimed with a message from Mr. Park. The new website had already received 3 inquiries about vacant apartments. More interest in one day than the old site had generated in months. "How you have a gift for this," his message said. "My nephew in Canada is impressed too. He wants to know if you're available for freelance work." Ji-eun smiled as she typed her reply. The European vacation had given her beautiful memories and much-needed rest. But it had also given her something unexpected, a new direction. A skill she had previously viewed as just a hobby, now revealed as something valuable. She opened Antonio's limoncello and poured herself a small glass, sipping the bright, tangy liqueur as she scrolled through her vacation photos one more time. There she was, standing on a Florence street with Mija and Antonio, all 3 smiling in the golden afternoon light. Life had a funny way of working out, Ji-eun thought. She had asked to pause her rent payments for a vacation and ended up discovering a new path forward instead. 6 months after launching the new website, Ji-eun sat across from Mr. Park at a small coffee shop near the hospital. She had just finished her morning shift and still wore her blue scrubs under her coat. Mr. Park pushed a folder across the table toward her. "These are the numbers," he said, tapping the folder with one finger. "I wanted you to see them yourself." Ji-eun opened the folder and studied the graphs and charts inside. The building's occupancy had increased by 15% since the website launch. What had been 3 persistent vacancies were now filled with new tenants who had found the property online. "The virtual tours made all the difference," Mr. Park explained, pointing to one chart. "People used to have to take time off work to view empty units. Now they can see everything from their phones first. By the time they come in person, they're already halfway to signing." Ji-eun smiled, feeling a surge of pride. "I'm glad it's working so well." "Working well?" Mr. Park shook his head. "It's transformed my business. Do you know the property management company I spoke with last week asked who designed my website? They thought I had hired some expensive agency. The waitress arrived with their order, barley tea for Mr. Park and a latte for Ji-eun. Mr. Park waited until she left before continuing. "I've purchased 2 more buildings since we last spoke," he said, stirring honey into his tea. "Small ones, but good investments. They need websites too." Ji-eun nodded. "I'd be happy to help when I have time off, maybe next month after I'm not asking for a favor this time," Mr. Park interrupted gently. He pulled out another folder and placed it beside the first one. "This is a proper offer. A permanent role managing the digital presence for all my properties, part-time to start, with flexible hours that work around your nursing schedule." Ji-eun's eyes widened as she opened the second folder and saw the salary figure. It was generous, enough, that she could reduce her nursing hours if she wanted to. "I can't leave nursing completely," she said, thinking aloud. But maybe dropping to 3 shifts a week instead of 5. That's exactly what I had in mind, Mr. Park nodded. You shouldn't give up your profession. But this could be a second income stream, doing work you clearly enjoy. They spent the next hour discussing details, responsibilities, expectations, hours. By the time Ji-eun had to leave for a dentist appointment, they had shaken hands on an arrangement that felt right to both of them. As she walked to the subway station, Ji-eun marveled at how much had changed because of one impulsive email asking to pause her rent. Not only had she experienced her dream European vacation, but she had also discovered a marketable skill and now had a second job that energized rather than depleted her. But the most surprising changes were happening in the building itself. It started with a small notice Mr. Park posted in the lobby 2 weeks after their coffee shop meeting. Skills Exchange Program, the heading read. Below was an explanation. Tenants with valuable skills could exchange services for partial rent credit during difficult financial times. The idea had grown from their conversations about Ji-eun's website work. Not everyone can build websites, Mr. Park had said, but everyone knows how to do something useful. Tae-woo, a retired teacher in apartment 301, was the first to sign up. His pension barely covered his living expenses, and recent medical bills had stretched his budget to breaking point. Under the new program, he offered tutoring sessions for the building's school-aged children 3 afternoons a week. In exchange, Mr. Park reduced his rent by 20%. The arrangement benefited everyone. The children's test scores improved, working, parents gained reliable after-school care, and Tae-woo maintained his dignity while easing his financial strain. Do-hyun, a plumber living in apartment 205, joined the program next. He had lost his job when his company downsized, but had 20 years of experience fixing pipes and unclogging drains. Rather than fall behind on rent while job hunting, he now handled minor plumbing repairs in the building for a 30% rent reduction. Mr. Park saved money on emergency maintenance calls, and Do-hyun could focus on finding a new full-time position without the immediate pressure of eviction. Soon, other tenants discovered their own contributions. Hyung-mai, a college student studying design, created beautiful seasonal decorations for the lobby. Jin-ho, an accountant, offered free tax preparation help to elderly residents. Soo-jin, who had worked as a gardener before retirement, transformed the building's neglected courtyard into a thriving community garden where neighbors now gathered on warm evenings. 6 months into the program, the building had changed in ways no one could have predicted. Neighbors who had previously only nodded politely in the hallways now knew each other's names and stories. The community room, once used only for mandatory building meetings, now hosted weekly gatherings, movie nights, book clubs, and cooking. Classes taught by residents sharing family recipes. Word spread beyond their building. Other landlords in the neighborhood began asking Mr. Park about his revolutionary tenant program. A local newspaper ran a small feature story about the skills exchange, calling it a compassionate approach to housing in difficult economic times. One evening, as Ji-eun updated the website with photos from the building's first community dinner, Mr. Park stopped by her apartment with a small gift, a framed picture of the courtyard garden in full bloom, with residents gathered around tables, laden with shared food. "Do you know what my wife Sua used to say?" he asked, accepting the tea Ji-eun offered. "She said buildings aren't just stacks of apartments, they're vertical villages. We've just forgotten how to live that way." He looked at the photo with satisfaction. This is what she meant, people taking care of each other. Ji-eun thought about how it had all started, with her desperate request to pause rent payments for a vacation. Such a small beginning for such meaningful change. "I never expected any of this when I sent that email," she admitted. Mr. Park smiled. The best journeys often start with unexpected steps. Later that night, as Ji-eun watered the plants on her small balcony, she could hear laughter from the courtyard below, Tae-woo telling animated stories to a group of residents. From another open window came the sound of someone playing a guitar. The building felt alive in a way it never had before. Her phone chimed with a message from Mija in Florence. "Antonio and I are visiting next month. Brother says you've transformed the building. Cannot wait to see the famous Ji-eun's work." Ji-eun smiled, thinking of the photo album she had created of her European adventure. She would show it to Mija and Antonio, reliving those perfect days in Florence. But more importantly, she would show them what their kindness had helped create, a true community where people had learned to value each other for more than just the money they could pay. Her simple vacation request had inadvertently created something far more valuable than memories. It had created a blueprint for a more humane approach to housing that neighboring buildings were now beginning to adopt.